that we are recording. I have confirmation that we're recording, so I'll now take the adjournment for the meeting of the Education Resources Committee of the 9th of November 2021. Councillor Allison is here, Councillor Anderson is also here. Andy Harvey, an external representative, can you confirm your attendance?
I can, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Christine Hall, an external representative, can you confirm your attendance also?
Yes, I'm here, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Craig?
Present.
Present. Councillor Burns? Nothing from Councillor Burns. Councillor Cooper? Nothing from Councillor Cooper. Councillor Cowie?
I'm here.
Okay, Councillor Craig is present. Councillor Donnelly, I see that you're at the meeting.
Yeah, I'm here.
As is Councillor Dorman. I have apologies from Councillor Dryborough. Councillor Fagan, I see that you're at the meeting.
I'm here, Pauline, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton, I see that you're also here, as is Councillor Harrow. Councillor Horsham, I see that you're also at the meeting. Councillor Hose is at the meeting, as is Councillor Loudon. Councillor McAdams. Councillor McAdams, I'm seeing you present at the meeting. Can you just confirm your attendance?
Apologies, Pauline. I had a problem there. That's me only just a second signed on, so apologies.
No, thank you very much. That's great. Councillor McCallan is at the meeting, as is Councillor Mars. Councillor Miller is at the meeting, as is Councillor Nayland. Councillor Nugent.
Hi, Pauline.
Thank you. Councillor Razak.
I'm here.
Thank you, Councillor Razak. Councillor Ross. Nothing from Councillor Ross. I see that Councillor Scott is here. Councillor Walker.
Sorry, here.
Thank you. And I see that Councillor Watson is also here. Looking at the external representatives, John Mulligan is here. Dr. Iskander. Nothing from Dr. Iskander. Gillian Coulter. Nothing from Gillian Coulter. Anne-Marie Hobson.
Chair, apologies for Anne-Marie Hobson.
Okay, thank you. Hilary Kirby has indicated her apologies. Christine Hall, I see, is here. I have someone waiting in the lobby Durham room. I'm going to admit that person to see if they're an external representative.
It's Morizak, Pauline.
Okay, thank you very much. That's great. And with that, Chair, I'll pass back to you. Just before I do that, is there any member attending or substituting whose name I haven't mentioned? Okay, there are a number of officers also present at the meeting, and I'll hand back to you, Chair, for the business of the meeting.
Thank you very much, Pauline. Thank you for going through that. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to November's meeting of the Education Resources Committee. Before we begin, a couple of things. I will keep an eye on the time under the standing orders. We'll be scheduled to take a break around every hour, but I will try and time that to tie in with the end of an item. Questions through the chair, please, and I'll keep an eye out for hands up. Any technical difficulties, as Pauline said, please put them in the chat. We've got quite a lengthy list of items, agenda items to go through this morning, so please try to keep your questions as well, rather than longer statements. Does anyone have any declarations of interest before we begin properly? And I can see. Okay, thank you. Next item is the minutes of the previous meeting, which took place on the 31st of August, which begins on page 5 of your pack. Has everyone had a chance to look over the minutes of the last meeting and has a copy? Okay. Does anyone have any questions or matters arising from the minutes? Okay, I propose that we accept the minutes as an accurate record.
Second it, Chair.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Okay, moving on then to our monitoring items, which are items 3 to 5 this morning. Our first one is on revenue budget monitoring 2020-2021, begins on page 17 of our pack, and Louise Harvey is going to take us through this. Good morning, Louise.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Chair. So this is the second report presented to committee for the financial year 21-22, covering the period 1st of April through to the 10th of September this year, which is period 6 of our financial year. And we also give an update on the specific costs incurred in relation to the resources COVID response to date. So paragraph 4 on page 17 contains updated information in relation to the Scottish Attainment Challenge Fund. And for PEF, we have a total budget this year of 12.235 million, with spend and commitment to date as at the 10th of September of 6.094 million, with 6.14 million still to spend. And this includes the known staffing costs for the period 1st of April through to the 31st of March 22. In relation to SAC, the budget for the year is 1.971 million, and we've spend and commitment to date of 1.415 million, with 537,000 still to spend. And again, staff costs to the 31st of March 22 are reflected within this committed position. Turning to the main financial implications of the report, paragraph 6.1 on page 18 outlines the current position with an overspend of 249,000 against the phased budget. And this overspend is COVID related and reflects costs of increased utilities due to the increased ventilation requirements within our schools and establishment, and a reduction in budgeted income from instrumental music service fees for the period April to August this year. We have spend of 4.304 million in learning recovery, and this also links to the later report in learning recovery from page 46 on the staffing, covering teachers and school support assistants, as well as supported study, Pathfinder projects, additional cleaning, PPE and test and protect support as well, and that's part of our learning recovery strategy, as you know. And 4.134 million of this is funding from learning recovery funds. There is no variance in education's core budget in totality. However, variance explanations show movements on several budget lines reflecting an underspend in areas of early learning and childcare, and increased costs in transport and external placements, and these are outlined in Appendix A. We have our standard budget environments, and these are proposed at the bottom of Appendix A and reflect movements in education's budget since our last reported report on the 16th of July through to the 10th of September. And these cover the following main areas: transfers from reserves to reflect expenditure commitments in the areas of ICT and our PEF carry forward, transfers to capital for early learning and childcare outdoor learning, the creation of budget to reflect external funding, mostly for the 100 days commitment for music tuition, core curriculum funding and additional teachers and school support assistants funding. The realignment of budget to reflect how we deliver our services and how money is spent in terms of our PEF money, our early learning and childcare again, youth employability, our milk and healthy snack funding and MCR pathways, and also the realignment of budget within the resource to reflect the activity as part of the devolved management scheme in schools and our EMA payments. So if I can ask committee to refer back to paragraph 2, the committee is asked to approve an overspend of 249,000 as at the 10th of September on education's revenue budget. So that's to be approved, and that this is wholly COVID related, and also that the proposed budget environments be approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Louise. Any comments or questions for Louise on this? Councillor Allison.
Chair, as part of the budget last year, we allocated funding to education in terms of, I take it will be called pupil support during the recovery, so that any that had issues during the previous 18 months could get support. I don't see anything in this revenue report, so I take it that funding is not part of this revenue report. So where will this be reported? Because we're now halfway through the year, and it would be good to know what we have been able to do to help these pupils who were requiring extra support.
There is additional support being allocated, Councillor, if you're referring to the winter clothing programme, and
No.
that's sorry.
No, it was off the top of my head, it was £2 million. I think we put in the budget process that we allocated to education. I'll call it just generally for recovery.
Yeah, that is
where is that being reported?
Yeah, it is part of this report. It's contained within the position at the moment, the 4.4 million, I think I said, and that reflects it was allocated, you'll remember, to additional staffing for recovery, and also part of it was for digital inclusion, 220,000. So that is part of the overall position and is part of our support with the additional teachers and school support assistants that we've brought in from April, but updated to the new position from August. So it is part of that overall budget in terms of the 15 million, 2.245 million of which came from the dedicated funding and council investment programme that you're referring to, so it is included within that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Louise. Councillor Allison as well, we've got item for noting coming up later as well on education recovery and the sort of key actions that have taken place so far,
yes,
and next steps as well. So we'll be able to...
I did see that, but that does not mention council funding, it only mentions Scottish Government funding.
Well, so there's maybe something you'd like to raise at that time as well. Thanks for your question just now. If there's no further questions on this, are we happy to accept the report?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 4, another monitoring item. This is Capital Budget Monitoring 21-22, and it begins on page 23 of our pack. This runs from April to September, and Lorraine Hagan's going to take us through this. Good morning, Lorraine.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Committee. This is the second Capital Budget Monitoring Report for Education Resources and takes us to the period from the 1st of April to the 10th of September, which is our accounting period 6 of the year. Section 3 of your report provides the background and advises that the last time we reported to Committee, the budget for education resources was 20.4 million. Since that last meeting, we have had adjustments to the programme presented and approved by Executive Committee. These total a net decrease of 2.414 million and are detailed in Appendix A, and it's the movement in the spend profile for the Clyde Terrace Early Years project, offset by 2 additions to this year's programme, which are funded by revenue monies in relation to early years, and Louise picked up on them in her report. So that's resulted now in a revised budget for the year of 17.986 million. Section 4 of your report details the capital programme update then for 21-22 with a breakdown in Appendix A of your report. Section 4.1 notes the new capital programme for the year of 17.986. Anticipated spend to date was 5.010 and we spent £5.269 million. So we are in a position of 259,000 ahead of profile, and that mainly reflects just the timing of spend in relation to a number of projects, including the conversion of a dining hall into classrooms at Crawford Dyke Primary School and some of the remaining early years projects. So I'll be looking to refer Committee back to the recommendations in Section 2 and ask that you note the revised budget of 17.986 million and also that you note the spend to the 10th of September of 5.269 million. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, Lorraine. Any comments or questions on item 4? None that I can see. Happy to accept the report.
Agreed.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, moving on to the last of our monitoring items. This is on workforce monitoring, July to August 2021, begins on page 27 of your pack, and Aileen's going to take us through this. Good morning.
Good morning, thank you very much. So yes, this is the standard workforce monitoring report for education resources, and it provides employment information for July to August 2021. So section 4.1 of the report, the details are in Appendix 1, and that details the attendance statistics for the resource. So the resource absence figure for August 2021 was 2.8%, which is 1.9% lower than the council-wide figure. And based on the absence figures at August 2021, the projected annual average for the resource for 21-22 is 3.9%. So moving on, sections 4.2 to 4.5, the details are in Appendix 2. So during the period, there were 175 occupational health referrals. There were 47 accidents and incidents recorded within the period. There were 5 disciplinary hearings held within the resource, and there were no grievances or dignity at work issues raised. There were 78 leavers in the resource during this period, and 23% of these employees completed exit interviews. So in section 4.7 appendix, the details are in appendix 2A, which provides a breakdown of vacant posts during the period. And in the period, 228 posts became vacant, and managers indicated that 225 of these would be filled. There was one post that will be filled on a fixed term basis. One post was the end of a fixed term contract, and there's one post being held for savings. So I'm referring committee back to section 2 and ask that the employment information for July to August for education resources is noted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and for all of the additional information we've got in the appendices as well. I have Councillor Nayland looking to ask a question.
Thank you, Chair. I've actually got two questions. I don't know how well you're going to be able to answer these, obviously, for data protection, but I'm looking at 4.4, and there were 5 disciplinary hearings held within the period, an increase of 4, so it's jumped from 1 to 5, and that's just in a month, and in a month when schools are mainly off. Just wondered whether there's been any change there that's precipitated additional disciplinaries. And the other thing is the age-old violent incidents, physical violent incidents. In 1 month, 2021, July, August, there were 43. What are we doing to actually stop this? Because this is people we're talking about. This is teachers that are being violently assaulted. It's not just numbers and stats, it's actual people. How many people are subject to repeated attacks, and how many pupils are involved? Is it the same pupils attacking the same teachers? I'm just wondering, because these figures give me cause for concern.
Thank you, Councillor Nayland. I see Tony McDade, do you want to come in there?
Thanks. Thank you, Chair. I'll possibly hand back to Eileen just around the very specifics about the one on disciplinary, but I suspect that answer will be around the timescales more to do that than to do with anything specific issues. If just specifically around physical incidents, we do discuss, Councillor Nayland will remember, we discussed this at length. As a reminder, and we do provide a breakdown, and Eileen will probably have those details as well. The bulk of those incidents, they are physical incidents, and I think we need to be cautious about describing them as violent attacks. I think that they are physical incidents, and we ask staff to report them. The bulk of them are children in P1 to P3 with a specific additional support need, displaying distressed behaviour. And I think that the context of that is it's important that our members of staff do report that, because we then look at if there's a pattern, we then look at trying to support the individual child, we then try to support the individual member of staff, and indeed look at those mechanisms of support that are required within it as well. We encourage people to report these incidents. We don't try not to report them. Actually, quite the reverse. I think your point is well made that we need to make sure that staff are supported. But I think we need to be careful of the context of this as well. These are physical incidents as opposed to describing them as specifically violent incidents. But we accept that there's an absolute duty of care for us with members of staff, and making sure that members of staff are reporting them so that we can look at patterns. All of that data is analysed. There is liaison and support with the line manager's responsibility to try to support that member of staff, but actually crucially as well, there's appropriate support for that child or for that young person that's been involved in that incident as well. So for reassurance, and as I say, I think we do speak about this a lot at the committee, but as a reminder, and in terms of the reporting of those incidents, it won't necessarily be in that 1 month. What will happen is when people come back to school, they will report what has happened potentially in May and June as well. And the reason there's been an uplift, if you think about it, the previous year, the May and June time was in lockdown versus the May and June time of this year. So that's probably why you see a difference in the figures as well.
Thank you, Tony. Okay, Lynn?
Yeah, thank you. It's just that it is listed in the appendix as violent incident physical. That's the listing of it. It's interesting that it's mainly P1 to P3, and I wasn't comparing the figures this year with last year because I appreciate that last year's was skewed. But thank you, you provided me with some very interesting information, Tony. Thanks.
Thank you, Lynn. Eileen, did you want to come back on the first point about grievances?
The disciplinary hearings, yes, and probably just to echo what Tony said, it's a timing issue. So there may well have been a number of ongoing investigations, and what the report details is the disciplinary hearings that have actually taken place. So well, I appreciate, you know, you see 5 and you think, has there been a particular incident? It's maybe a number of ongoing investigations that have just concluded at the same time, and they may well have taken a length of time to get to the stage where they get to a disciplinary hearing.
Thank you very much, Eileen. Councillor Nailan, your hand was still up there. I'm not sure if that's just not refreshed on my screen.
Sorry, I thought I'd taken it down.
Thank
it's
you.
Not showing on mine.
I think it takes a while sometimes. I'll try and refresh this. I have Councillor Allison, please.
Yeah, just quickly, Chair, the joint staff watching return, would it be possible to get a comparison each time year on year? Because I'm aware that staffing numbers will vary throughout the year and there is often changes that are reported, but being able to put them into context overall, I think would be helpful in knowing where we are compared to a year ago.
Yep, I'm sure that's something we...
Yeah, that's standard information that's available. That's a standard return that we do on a quarterly basis. So yeah, I can give you a breakdown year on year if that's what you're after. That's fine.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Eileen. There's no further comments or questions on this. Are we happy to accept the report?
Agreed.
Great, thank you. Moving on to items for decision, we have 2 this morning. First one, always a popular topic. We have school holiday dates, session 22 to 23, begins on page 37 of our pack, and Des Dixon's going to take us through this. Good morning, Des.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning, everyone, and thanks again. You'll know that I've spent half the year encouraging children to return to school, and I always think it's ironic that I've got the school holiday dates. But this report advises on the proposed dates for school holidays from August 2022 through to 2023, following quite an extensive consultation with stakeholders. And as members will know, children are required to attend in Scotland for 190 days, with teachers working 195 with 5 in-service days. And the school holiday dates normally fall into 3 terms and take account of national and local public holidays. I have to ask for an apology, Chair. In paragraph 3.3, we actually say Good Friday falls on the 2nd of April, when in actual fact it should be the 7th of April and Easter Monday on the 10th of April, and that's in 2023, so my apologies here. But nevertheless, the views were sought from a range of stakeholders on the proposed school holiday dates, including our neighbouring local authorities and wider in the West Partnership, and to try and achieve, where possible, a common pattern of school holiday dates across Lanarkshire for the benefit of obviously parents, children and families. And arrangements were also made to consult with parent councils and our professional associations and trade unions. In paragraph 4, we outline the consultation with those stakeholders, and interestingly enough, over 2,200 comments made on school holidays, as you've heard me saying before, a variety of support, a variety of colourful opinions about school holiday dates, but nevertheless, the vast majority are respectful and in actual fact endorse the proposals. So, Chair, this morning, I suppose what we're asking really is a proposal based on the majority have agreed with the proposed school holiday dates, although we did recognise that in our early consultation, we made a change to what our initial February week was. It was a bit too early, and that was identified by mostly parents and staff. So we amended that, and that now is in line with our neighbouring authorities. So this morning, Chair, the committee is asked to approve the following recommendation: that the proposed dates for school holidays and in-service days in South Lanarkshire for session 2022-23, as detailed in Appendix 1, be approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Des. Any comments or questions on this, anyone? I've got Councillor Allison and then Christine Hall. I'll take Councillor Allison, please.
No, I think you're needing to refresh again, Chair.
Sorry about this. Okay, this was after this morning. I was excited about the fact my laptop did seem to be behaving itself this week, but I spoke too soon. I've got Christine Hall then, please. Morning, Christine.
Morning. It's just to say that on the appendix, the date for Good Friday is one day out. I know Des amended it in paragraph 3, I think, but it just needs amended on the notes.
Yes, thank you, Christine. We've got that. Yeah, thank you for pointing that out.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks very much, Christine. There's nobody else. Could I propose that we accept the recommendations at 2?
I'll second it, Chair.
Great, thank you very much. Note for parents, carers and grandparents in service day this coming Monday. That one caught me by surprise. So perhaps now that we've agreed these print out the next year's dates. Thank you very much. On to next item for decision, which is item 7. It begins on page 41. And this is an update report on attachment strategy and seeking approval for additional resources for a new post to support the implementation and the sustained implementation rather of the attachment strategy. And Anne Donaldson's going to take us through this. Good morning, Anne.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to seek approval for additional resources for the post of a development officer to support the sustained and effective implementation of the attachment strategy and to inform members of next steps to embed attachment informed practice across the authority. Turning to the background then, and paragraph 3.3, members will be aware that the Education Resources Attachment Strategy supports the action in the GIRFIC in South Lanarkshire's Children's Services Plan 21 to 23, following the launch of the strategy in 2020, to provide staff training in attachment and trauma-based practice. Although the focus is on education practitioners, the strategy has been developed in consultation with partner agencies, and the intention would be to roll out training across the children's services workforce. The strategy promotes better experiences of attachment for South Lanarkshire's children. Paragraph 3.4 describes how there was a substantial update of the attachment strategy for education resources at the previous committee, and this noted its centrality to supporting trauma-informed practice and providing an approach that buffers the impact of adverse childhood events for our most vulnerable children and young people. Section 4 describes the aims of the attachment strategy, and Section 5 the implementation of the strategy to date, and members will be familiar with this. Turning then to Section 6 and next steps around implementation. Paragraph 6.1 describes how the strategy implementation group will continue to oversee and advise on next steps throughout 21 to 22. And 6.2, that all education establishments and services have been asked to nominate attachment leads and ambassadors within their organisations, and these will be very important roles. Paragraph 6.3 describes how these individuals will be invited or have been invited to locality networking events from October 21. And 6.4, that a glow tile will be developed to provide a shared platform to share learning materials and communication. Importantly, it's recognised that the next stage of the attachment strategy implementation is crucial in terms of embedding the longer term changes that will promote the best outcomes for our children and young people. The proposal then is detailed in paragraph 6.6, and that is to appoint a development officer on a seconded basis for a period of 12 months. This post will strengthen the development of nurturing approaches across the council to ensure long-term positive change for our children, young people and families. And in terms of the financial implications, paragraph 8.1 describes how the post will be funded from education recovery funding across 21-22 and 22-23, supporting and strengthening nurture and attachment for young people during the recovery period. Turning back then to the recommendations in paragraph 2.1, committee is asked to approve the following recommendation: that the requirement of a post of development officer as detailed in section 7 to support sustained implementation of the attachment strategy and improve outcomes for children and young people be approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Anne. Anyone have any comments or questions on this report just now? Councillor Harrow.
Thank you, Chair. I'm always amazed at the terms that come up in education, and I'm glad I don't need to remember them anymore. In 6.4, could you tell me what an attachment strategy glow tile is? I'm amazed.
I'll do my best. I'm not as IT literate as some of my colleagues, so I'll do my best. The shared platform across education where we can share information, communicate and share resources is called GLOW. And everyone in education has what they call a GLOW email address, if you like, and they can sign in and they can access a wealth of national resources and also local resources in terms of education. So what we can do is we can develop what we call GLOW tiles, which is basically an area within GLOW, the network, where we can focus on specific areas of interest or development. So for example, my team I'm responsible for the inclusion team, the inclusive education team, psychological services, youth family community learning service, and they each have a GLOW tile where all of their business is deposited, if you like, and people can, they can click in and out and they can get access to communication and resources. But it's a national resource, but it's flexible in relation to how we can develop it at a local level. And apologies for not making that more explicit. I should have done because, as I say, I'm not as IT literate as some of my colleagues.
That was very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if any of my
Excellent.
colleagues would want to add to that. Tony, was that sufficient?
I think you're on mute, Tony. It was nodding the one.
Yeah, I've nothing to add. That was a perfect description.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Anne. It does sound like something you would collect in a video game, doesn't it? A GLOW tile. Special powers. Thank you for going through that. I've got Christine Hall, but I'm not sure if that's a legacy hand, Christine, again.
No, yes, it is. I'm not looking to speak.
Okay, sorry about that. Sorry, everyone. It looks like we'll need to put up with this this morning. Please give me a shout if I miss you. Do be dance or wave or put your microphone up and speak out. Okay, if there's no further questions on this, then I would propose that we accept the recommendations as they are at 2.1.
I'll second it, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, no further comments or questions. Thank you for going through that, Anne, and for the committee's interest in this interest and input in this area over the past few committees and over the past few years. I think has got us to this point, and it's really positive going forward. So thank you for taking that on. That was our final item for decision, everyone. We're moving on to items for noting. Our first one begins on page 45 on your pack. This is on education recovery, key actions and next steps. And this is to provide insight into the Scottish Government's report on education recovery. And to take us through that is going to be Des Dixon this morning. Hello again, Des.
Yes, thanks, Chair, and I think absolutely right. The purpose of this report this morning is to let the committee know that in October 2021, the Scottish Government published its report called Education Recovery, Key Actions and Next Steps, and it's a 42-page report. In many ways, it aligns to the South Lanarkshire Education, Learning Recovery and Renewal, which we highlighted on the 1st of June. And Councillor Allison had highlighted earlier on this morning about some of the actions that we've taken in support of financial aspects, and they were highlighted in that particular report. So we'll go through and we'll see describe for you what really the Scottish Government have outlined. So the background to the report is that Scottish Education, the Scottish Government Education Recovery Report recognises the role played by local authorities and partners in adapting to the global pandemic. It specifically highlighted, quite rightly, the dedication and innovation that those working in our schools and our nurseries and educational settings have shown and continue to show on a daily basis to support our children and young people. And significantly, in para 3.2.3, there is recognition that the impacts of the pandemic cannot be addressed by the education system alone, and I think that's quite pertinent. The pandemic has continued to bring into sharp focus some of the inequalities that persist in the education system, and therefore the government's strategy is to focus on, and it's highlighted in that report, financial security for low-income households, the well-being of children and young people, and Anne's just given you an example of that in terms of attachment, and also the green jobs and fair work. But also on maintaining, and I think importantly for education, it's maintaining that focus on excellence and equity for all children and young people. So the Scottish Government report, The Next Steps, highlights the plan to build on the innovation and strengths that have emerged during the pandemic. It recognises that schools, teachers and our early years staff are best placed to help individual children, including identifying those who need extra support with specific subjects or with their health and well-being, and what type of support is required. Members may know, or may recall, that our latest elected member briefing last week that certain restrictions still apply in school and nursery settings in line with public health guidance, and it's important to note that. So in paragraph 4.2 and 4.3, we have set out the details on the financial support being provided by the Scottish Government for this financial year as part of the education recovery, and of the total being provided for the recruitment of extra staff and to provide additional support for learning. And it's spelled out there, the allocation and the pro rata for South Lanarkshire. I have to say that Stuart Nicholson actually keeps right on the ball in terms of the appointment of our teachers and our staffing, holds regular weekly meetings, so he has all that information and knowledge of how we're using that money, and obviously in allocation of the teachers and support assistants, etc. So with this additional support for teachers and support assistants, the focus for education recovery will be a renewed focus on excellence and equity as set out in the National Improvement Framework, and the areas of national focus are set out in paragraph 4.6. And just to highlight a couple, exploring early learning and childcare, supporting learning and attainment, supporting our workforce, and additional support for learning are just some of the examples that are highlighted there. I think it's also worth noting the evidence-based research by the International Council for Education Advisors, who were set up in 2016 to look at how best to achieve excellence and equity in education across Scotland. And their comment is quite significant also, that the pandemic has disproportionately impacted on the poorest individuals, families and communities in our society. And I'm sure elected members will recognise that with the supports that the Council has put in over the last 18 months or so. So therefore, the actions in education recovery are nested within a wider set of important policy priorities that are progressed in tandem with a whole system approach. And that's required in an example showing there in keeping the promise to improve the lives of care experienced children and young people. In paragraph 5, we describe how the recommendations by the OECD are being taken forward by Professor Ken Muir, including a review of Education Scotland and SQA and the curriculum, and that consultation is currently ongoing. But perhaps the next steps for Scottish Government have been clearly outlined, but what I'm going to show you hopefully this morning is how we as a council have taken some of these already on board. So paragraph 6 sets out the next steps, most of which I believe will be familiar to members of this committee, following progress reports and the investment made by the council, for example, on our new and refreshed early years statement and our commitment to deliver 1140 hours, and also access to quality play for some of our more younger children. Keeping our schools open and low risk of COVID, and to keep them open and welcoming as possible, a key feature, and well done to everybody in the school setting. And of course, the one that we've talked about in many occasions here at committee, embedding counselling through the primary schools programme. And then obviously the key one for me, ensuring teaching and support for learning is of a high quality and focused on the individual learner, and it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And just an example, on page 21 of the Scottish Government report, there is a case study of teaching and learning through a good practice example in numeracy and mathematics involving South Lanarkshire schools and supported by our CQIS service, and we're pleased to see this highlighted. Of course, there are a number of other areas of education recovery that include parental engagement, learning voice, and obviously the plans to undertake a whole system review in response to the OECD recommendations, and that's a national picture. So what are our next steps? Well, I think we will continue through our South Lanarkshire Education Recovery and Renewal Programme to monitor progress. And as colleagues have said this morning, the Scottish Attainment Fund and the Pupil Equity Fund and the support for schools will continue to be evaluated and reported on an annual basis, and it's within the Council's plans. And maybe just, Chair, if you don't mind, I'm just going to go offbeat a wee bit as a wee aside. We mentioned this morning supporting the workforce, and that's a key aspect of this particular report and our duty of care. Just before coming into the meeting this morning, we got an update on the numbers of staff who've taken up the option of the flu vaccination in our schools, and that includes staff and pupils. So this morning the figure is 70% of staff in primary schools have taken up the flu vaccination offer in schools, and 74% of staff in secondary. And members may recall that that was a significant change from the NHS to offer that in a school setting. So it's a whole combination of factors that will help to make a difference. So, Chair, finally from me this morning, thank you, is that the committee is asked to approve the following recommendation: that the Scottish Government's report on education recovery, which sets out key actions and next steps, be noted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Des. That's great news about the flu vaccination project. Thank you for that extra bit of information this morning. Okay, we'll start with Councillor McAdams, then Councillor Scott, please. Councillor McAdams.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Des, for the report. It's very meaty. And it's excellent that it focuses on excellence and obviously equity. I'm going to mention Councillor Driver at this point because I think that she has been instrumental in pushing things forward in the council, and I was pleased to second the motion that she put forward, which directly correlates with this, which is when she talked about the right for all children in South Lanarkshire to have the right to study in a learning environment which was fully inclusive, and everything that's in this report basically pushes these things forward, so obviously I welcome it. I wanted to talk about three things. I wanted to talk about, it was in relation to point 5.8, and I wanted to talk about food. I wanted to talk about reporting racist incidents, and I want to talk about...
Councillor McAdam.
Yes?
Sorry, I'm going to stop you for a second. I think you're actually on the wrong report.
Am I on report item 9?
We're on report number 8 just now, which is on the Scottish Government's education.
I completely and utterly apologise. I'm so sorry. That was me getting so excited to actually speak and talk about how great everybody was doing. I've jumped in at the wrong item, so apologies.
Okay, we'll bring you back in the correct
item.
Thank you. No problem. I'm thinking it's not a 5.8 on that. Scrolling desperately.
Thank you for catching me. I appreciate that.
No problem. We'll bring you in when we come on to that item. Councillor Scott then, please.
Thank you so much, Chair. I'll just make sure I've got a right page and a right report here. Yes, I do. I want to refer to 4.3 on page 46 on my scepticism on Scottish Government funding numbers. I notice here on the SLC share of £80 million for 22-23, it's got to be confirmed estimate 4.8 million. Do we have an actual number that it actually might come in at? Because obviously what Scottish Government or our estimates of what we think the Scottish Government are going to give us and what actually materialises is very often very divergent. And I'll give you a reason why I say that. The shambles over the play park money, when Kate Forbes announced 60 million, then once it got to the minutiae, it was 60 million over 5 years. That's 12 million a year. And the only tranche what local government is getting is 5 million. So there is a divergence between what the Scottish Government numbers are promising and what they actually deliver. So it's just to get a proper estimate or a realistic estimate of what our share of the 80 million is going to be. I know it's down here as 4.8, but promises delivered and promises offered and promises delivered in the Scottish Government haven't actually materialised recently. If I can have comment on that, that'd be nice. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I'm sure what has been given in the report down as the estimate is the most accurate estimate which our officers can give us just now. Des, I don't know if you've got any further comment on that.
I think that is the answer to Councillor Scott at the moment. That's that estimate at the moment because it's a future funding. So yes, I think that's the position we're in at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Des. Councillor Nealon, please.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's just a comment. I think I might have jumped in ahead of Councillor Harrow, actually.
No, not according to my list, you're okay. So
right. So apologies, Ian. So apologies, Ian. You were slow getting your hand up there. I'm looking at 6.2 for other areas of focus for education recovery. I'm looking at the bullet point over the page from that. So I'm now on page 48. It says class contact time, reducing teachers' class contact time by 1.5 hours per week. Can I just ask how that's going to improve education recovery? Why they're going to be reducing by 1.5 hours a week? Thank you.
Yeah, I think Tony's going to take that one, Chair.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Nealon.
Yes, okay.
That's the Scottish Government commitment. The OECD report in May stated that Scottish teachers on average teach more than their international colleagues, and this has been a follow-up to it. The detail of it has still to be identified, but I suppose from a general perspective, as opposed to a recovery context, the notion of colleagues having a wee bit more time to work together, to a bit more time in terms of their workload, in terms of planning, you hope there's then a direct benefit. But from our perspective, we await the detail of that, but that was one of the announcements, and it directly lines up to the OECD report itself.
Thank you, Tony. Kaylin?
Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, Councillor McAdams, please.
Katie, I've taken my hand down. That's from
right.
when I was making a show of myself earlier on ahead of the next item.
No problem. Councillor Allison.
Yeah, just following on, Tony, from what you said there, the OECD recommending 1.5 hours per week less contact time. We're taking on extra teachers. Will the extra teachers more than cover that class time? Or are we simply taking on extra teachers to facilitate that 1.5 hour reduction per teacher?
Tony, you want to come back in?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Allison. That correlation's not been made yet. So at the moment, the contract is still 22.5 hours of teaching, and that's what we work to at the moment. So this is a government ambition. So at the moment, the extra teachers are in, and it's not related to the 1.5 hours. It's related to maybe taking some extra classes directed at individual young people, or supporting actually where we have cover issues. Obviously, given the fact that we're still in the throes of the pandemic and looking at self-isolation and recovery activity, so there's no connection as such yet. I think that's still to come.
Thank you, Tony. Okay, Alex. Okay, thank you. There's no further comments or questions on this that I can see. I think, oh, Councillor Allison, your hand's back up again, but unless you shout, I'm just going to ignore it because I think it's my end. Apologies for this, everyone. If there's no further comments or questions, are we happy to accept this report?
Agreed, Chair.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, next item for noting is item 9. This is on support for equality and diversity within education resources. Begins on page 51. This is to provide an update on the breadth of activity that has been conducted across education resources in this area. And Anne Donaldson's going to take us through this. Thanks again, Anne.
Thank you, Chair. It's a fairly lengthy report, so I'll just highlight maybe some of the information that's available. So the purpose of the report is to provide an update on the breadth of activity being conducted across education resources in relation to support for equality and diversity. Section 3 gives the background to report, and paragraph 3.1 describes that education in South Lanarkshire is based on an inclusive ethos that ensures that all learners are treated fairly, have equality of opportunity and have a sense of belonging in their learning environment. We are committed to the wellbeing of learners, reflecting the aspirations of the GIRFEC policy framework that all children and young people should be safe, healthy, achieving, nurtured, active, respected and included, and that they have their views listened to and are involved in decisions that affect them. Paragraph 3.2 offers a definition of the principles of equality and diversity, in that equality is the elimination of unlawful discrimination, harassment, victimisation and any other unlawful conduct. It's also the advancement of equality of opportunity and fostering of good relations to tackle prejudice and promote understanding. Diversity is about recognising and valuing difference, where everyone is respected for who they are. Section 4 describes the legislative and policy context, and a range of legislation and policy frameworks support this agenda across education contexts. And brief descriptions are included of each of those listed. So paragraph 4.411 describes the Equality Act 2010, 412 the Children and Young People Scotland Act 2014, 413 the Education Scotland Act 2016, 414 the Education Additional Support for Learning Scotland Act 2004 as amended, 415 the Education Disability Strategies and Pupil Educational Records Scotland Act 2002, 416 the Standards in Scotland Schools etc. Act 2000, and 417 and 418 deal with the policy agendas, the National Improvement Framework and Delivering Excellence and Equity in Scottish Education, a Delivery Plan for Scotland 2016. Moving now to section 5, which describes some specific areas of practice in relation to equality and diversity within education resources. I would start then with paragraph 5.1, which describes the provision for care experienced children and young people. And members are all too aware that children or young people who are care leavers are among some of the most vulnerable in our society. They have often experienced some form of abuse, neglect and trauma prior to becoming looked after. Every school has a designated senior manager who has responsibility for provision for care experienced children, and a range of refresh materials are available to these managers, supported by training, enabling them to best meet the needs of these children in line with the aspirations of the promise. Enhanced support for education recovery for care experienced pupils is currently being implemented through dedicated teaching support for S1 to S3 pupils in the initial phase, and the introduction of a tutor programme for S4 to S6 pupils. Paragraph 5.2 describes the safeguarding agenda and notes that everyone working with children and families is required to understand the important role that they play in remaining vigilant and providing robust support for the protection of children and young people. Every school and education establishment has a named child protection coordinator, and this person undertakes specific and regular training in the areas of child protection and safeguarding. In order to support their work, detailed education resources operating procedures, which are supported by a suite of staff resources and training materials, provide clear guidance around their roles and responsibilities. In addition, multi-agency training of staff in child exploitation online protection has continued to be delivered online to staff groups across Police Scotland, the NHS, social work and education resources, and also to foster carers. And to date, over 6,000 people in South Lanarkshire, including children, young people, parents, carers and professionals, have accessed CEOP presentations. Paragraph 5.3 discusses the Tackling Poverty agenda. Education Resources plays an integral role in meeting the ambitions and drivers of the South Lanarkshire Child Poverty Action Plan. And members will be aware that the equity team within Education Resources delivers training for schools on various aspects of equity. They provide bespoke advice to individual schools who request it, and they scrutinise attainment and achievement data to ensure that children and young people who should be benefiting from additional resources are accessing that additionality. What follows that then is a description of the SAC agenda and also the PEF agenda across South Lanarkshire. But there has been an increasing focus on the cost of the school day. And using the work of the Child Poverty Action Group, training materials and resources were adapted and developed to help schools better understand how they could reduce and hopefully remove costs in their schools. And again, members are aware that costs associated with curricular activity have been removed for all pupils, and digital inclusion continues to be addressed through the Scottish Government IT device scheme. Paragraph 5.3 goes on to describe the success of the first South Lanarkshire Council winter clothing campaign, which took place during winter 2021, and the nationally recognised work of the Youth, Family and Community Learning Service in tackling poverty and deprivation, and in particular their work during the lockdown period. The work of the Youth Employability Service in improving the lives of young people living in poverty by supporting progression to sustained positive destinations is also described in this section. And turning then to paragraph 5.4, which is on page 56, and the mental health agenda. Mental health is conceived as a continuum from short-term issues to serious longer-term mental health difficulties, which can impact on an individual reaching their potential. The next paragraph describes how where a child or young person presents with a mental health and wellbeing concern, an appropriate support from family, local community or pupil support services from within the universal service of education should always be considered as the first option. Schools play an important role in providing, and this is very important, the least intrusive, most inclusive support at the earliest stage, and the staged intervention process that follows might include planning and intervention from the school's joint assessment team, the educational psychology service, or some other school-based mental health support service. Should more intensive or specialist supports be required in line with staged intervention, schools may request assistance from agencies out with education, such as social work or mental health practitioners within health settings. And obviously emergency services would also always be contacted where there's a need for urgent and immediate intervention. An update on the progress of the Counselling Through Schools programme was presented at the last committee, and I've included a link there if members want to review that document. Further examples of supports which are accessed by schools to support mental health and wellbeing include the Blues programme, Together All, and also Lifelines Lanarkshire, and there is some description there of each of those. Paragraph 5.5 discusses provision for children and young people with severe and profound additional support needs. All pupils, including those with severe and profound additional support needs, have the right to access appropriate assessment and relevant and personalised learning experiences within the context of Curriculum for Excellence. The South Lanarkshire Framework for Supporting Pupils with Severe and Profound Learning Needs, which we call the framework, supports teachers and other school staff to deliver an elaborated, meaningful and enjoyable curriculum to this group of learners. And again, I've included a link so that members can access that document if they would like more information in relation to that. 5.6 deals with the issue of accessibility. Establishments must be aware of the importance of ensuring equality of access to all areas of school life for all learners. And in the Equality Act 2010, there are 3 elements to the duty of reasonable adjustments, and those elements relate to provisions, to provisions, criteria and practice, to auxiliary aids and services, and to making changes to the physical environment. And the rest of that section deals with the issues of physical adaptations, the provision of specialist equipment, importantly, the use of alternative and augmentative communication aids for children and young people who have no other way of communicating, and more generally, the use of a wide range of ICT equipment which promotes access to the curriculum. Again, members are aware that specialist provision for children and young people with sensory impairments do exist in South Lanarkshire Council, and we also have specialist provision for those children and young people who have social, emotional and behavioural needs. 5.7 discusses the area of dyslexia, and children and young people with significant literacy difficulties, including those with dyslexia, can struggle with learning, can become disengaged and demotivated, and they can underachieve markedly, both at home and afterwards, which can have wide-reaching negative implications for their future. Our staged intervention process emphasises the need to identify as early as possible those children with weak literacy skills, and it aims to support and improve their skills using evidence-based approaches and resources. I would want to highlight that the Literacy Strategy Implementation Group has developed materials which support all schools in identifying and appropriately supporting young people with weaker literacy skills and dyslexia, and those materials were recently launched at our inclusion conference in September and are currently being rolled out to head teachers, ASN coordinators and literacy coordinators using the networks for these groups. Paragraph 5.8 discusses the promotion of race equality and anti-racist education, and of course members are aware that all learners have a right to learn in an equitable environment where all cultures, identities and languages are recognised and valued, and where the curriculum responds to the diverse needs of individual learners, reflecting the uniqueness of their communities. Information is offered in relation to effective or features of effective race equality and anti-racist education, and there is a description of the types of learning activities that can take place in the early years, and then moving through as children move through schools, and seeing diversity education embedded across the curriculum. In addition to that, specific curriculum inserts, which are supported by contemporary resources and education packs, can also serve to reinforce race equality and anti-racist education. And we work with partners including Police Scotland and Show Racism the Red Card to deliver focused activities, including assemblies and PSHE lessons. All schools have an anti-bullying policy which reflects the national guidance, respect for all, and the guidance provides the overarching framework for all adults working with children and young people to address all types of bullying, including prejudice-based bullying. 5.9 deals with English as an additional language and describes some of the activity that takes place to support our children and families, including translation activity, direct teaching, remote communication, providing a helpline to respond to inquiries from families and schools, provision of home education packs, and also staff development for educational establishments. 510 describes provision for children with autistic spectrum disorder who are also entitled to access all broad and general learning opportunities provided by Curriculum for Excellence. They have differences in the areas of social interaction, social communication, and in their thinking style, and this is commonly known as the triad of impairment. I would highlight the South Lanarkshire framework for the education of pupils who have an autism spectrum disorder, and I've provided a link, and I think you would find that interesting. It does provide guidance which is based on relevant literature and research on the learning and teaching of pupils with autism. A number of schools have autism ambassadors, and they deliver specific autism awareness raising events for pupils and staff, and almost 3,000 school staff have been trained in the South Lanarkshire ASD consultation approach, which we know has positively impacted upon staff confidence and practice around the education of children and young people with autistic spectrum disorder in our schools. 511 covers the issue of anti-bullying, and our Treat Me Well anti-bullying guidelines, and again I've included a link which has been produced by South Lanarkshire Education Resources in partnership with Respect Me, is available for, if you wish to have a look at that. Staff training, which is delivered by the Respect Me team, assists schools in better understanding and dealing with bullying incidents. And in terms of activity to support positive ethos and culture throughout our schools, a range of initiatives take place, and we have anti-bullying ambassadors, focused assemblies, PSHE focused topics, and who work to promote a culture of positivity and celebration of difference. 512 describes our work around the LGBTI agenda and equality, and we have embraced our duties under the Equality Act 2010. And in doing that, our schools have made considerable progress in embedding approaches to tackling prejudice towards LGBTI young people in both the primary and secondary sectors. This has involved staff training, development and refresh of school policy documents, and a range of approaches in relation to the school environment. At national level, from September 2021, the LGBT Inclusive Education Implementation Group will progress the recommendations of the LGBTI Inclusive Education Working Group. The Implementation Group's membership includes teaching unions, LGBT groups, parent groups, and the Scottish Youth Parliament, and it's jointly chaired by COSLA and the Scottish Government officials, and aims to deliver the working group's recommendations in full. The National Parent Forum of Scotland have produced an information leaflet for parents and carers, which gives an overview of the content and rationale underpinning LGBT inclusive education. And again, I've included the link in case any members would wish to have a look at that resource. And last but not least, Gypsy Traveller Education. Many children and young people are mobile and experience interruptions to their learning. They all have an entitlement to school education and additional support should it be required. Our experience is that many Gypsy Traveller families are content for their children to attend primary school but choose not to register them in secondary school. And so we have our GTEG group, which runs 3 days a week and is based in ordinarily a YFCL centre, which caters for the needs of 1st to 6th year pupils who are engaging in that group. It aims to encourage young people from the Gypsy Traveller community to continue to engage in meaningful education opportunities at secondary age level. And parents are involved and engaged initially in their child's learning through home visits, and help is provided for homework in a non-judgmental, easy to understand way. GTEG offers individualised learning programmes across the broad general education and senior phase, and work is ongoing to build upon the existing offer and enable young people to access more qualifications through a wider range of Scottish qualification awards. Just to turn back then, Chair, to the recommendation, which is at paragraph 2.1, the committee is asked to approve that the range of work across education resources in respect of equality and diversity be noted. And thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Anne, for going through that and giving us some highlights from the report. It's a very detailed report, and as Anne said, there's plenty of other information which you can click through and read as well if you have an interest in a particular area. I've got three hands up just now of Councillor Nayland, Councillor Allison, and then Councillor McAdams. Councillor Nayland, please.
Thank you, Chair. It is indeed a very detailed and weighty report full of lots of interesting information. I'm just going to comment briefly on a couple of things. I'm really pleased to see that schools have started to compare cost of the school day and to work on bringing it down. I was aware that the majority of schools run a school uniform bank, if you like, but was very pleased to see that some of them have now started to do Halloween costume and Christmas jumper swaps as well, which is a brilliant idea. The winter clothing campaign with over 1,000 new winter jackets is absolutely brilliant, but I presume that it's a misprint because it started on the 21st of December 2021 to the 10th of January 2021. I presume that that's December 2020, but brilliant getting all those coats out to the children. The main point I've got actually is unsurprisingly on dyslexia. You've already said that you've started to roll out the materials, but I was wondering when this is going to actually hit the ground. First of all, when is it going to hit the ground? Secondly, is this going to apply to newly diagnosed dyslexic children, or will it be retrospective, going back through all the ones that are already known about? And the third thing is, could I have a copy of 2 of the leaflets, please? One for the parents' information leaflet and one of the young person's information leaflet, please, for personal use. And just finally, on the last item that was mentioned, the Gypsy Traveller children, could you confirm how many Gypsy Traveller children there are in South Lanarkshire that are of school age, please? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks, thank you. Yes, happy to get a copy of the leaflets to you. What I would say to you is that the rollout of the materials is taking place just now, and actually in terms of implementation of that resource, it is currently active, albeit it will be at different stages across different sites and locations. Happy to make available a copy of the whole resource. I know that you'll be interested in that, so I can certainly send on a link, and that'll give you maybe more information in relation to the background and development of the resource as well, and also maybe, you know, again, happy to link you with the folk who've been responsible for developing the resource. I know that you would find that helpful. In relation to the numbers of Gypsy Traveller children, I can get back to you on that. That's a seamless check. So we can check the system, the management information system, very quickly and get those numbers back to you for those children recorded as Gypsy Traveller children.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Anne. Thanks very much, Lynn. I've got quite a few hands up. Could people keep their questions relatively succinct, please, especially if they have multiple questions? I've got Councillor McAdams, followed by Councillor Fagan, please. Councillor McAdams.
Hi, thanks, Chair. So I'm definitely speaking to the right item this time. So for anybody that fell asleep last time, you will now be awake and know what item we're on. There was 3 things that I wanted to cover, Chair, that I wanted to ask questions on specifically, and it was all to do with item 5.8. So it was to do with the food. Hold on a second to silence my mum.
Sounds a bit ominous.
Sorry about that. Sorry, just didn't think you needed to hear a conversation with my Auntie Anne, but anyway. So there was 3 things that I wanted to have a conversation about and ask questions about, Katie. It was about food, it was about reporting racist incidents and questionnaires. So the food was a fairly simple one. It was to do with the halal and kosher. I just feel as if it needs to be promoted more on social media. It's something I've raised on numerous occasions now, and it hasn't happened, although it's something that has been continually highlighted through the work that myself and Councillor Razak are doing in the community, that people don't actually realise that we actually have those menus there. So I think we need to really make a concerted effort, just because I think that inclusion's very, very important, and one of the easiest ways to do it with our children is for them to actually share a meal. So that is something that I would like to see an agreement that basically is going to get promoted on social media. The second part was for the reporting of racist incidents. When a child or a family reports a racist incident, it's, it gets logged, but before, when it got logged on paper. It wasn't getting logged via CMIS, but I remember from a previous report, Tony had talked about that there was going to be an upgrade and that was going to get rolled out. So I just wanted to check what that date was and to when that was happening, just for the fact that I think it's really important that when somebody basically like experiences racism, it should be logged as racism, and I don't think it should come under the general term of bullying. I think we need to call it out for what it actually is. And the third thing was a questionnaire. One of the schools recently in South Lanarkshire rolled out a questionnaire, which was a really positive thing, and it was great for the results that came in, although some of them not so great, but it doesn't matter because the fact is we actually asked the question. So it was just to say that I would like, instead of being put solely on the head teacher, because I think our head teachers and our teachers and our people in school have got a lot of work on their shoulders just now because of COVID and whatever else. I wanted it to be something that we could ask if the education department would actually take it on to formalise the questionnaire, for it to go out to all of the schools, so that for any problems that we've got, we could just tackle it head on, and we could address it. So the questionnaire, I would say that it would have to go to Jill Batty to keep us all right, and it would have to go out to a group of people from the Black and minority ethnic community, and then go to the equity committee so that we could basically agree the questions. So I would like to ask if we could agree to address racism and the current issues that we have in our schools by putting out this questionnaire. So that was my 3 things, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. You want to come back in there?
Sure. Just in the note, the issue of food, I think your point about children sharing a meal from other cultures and appreciating that is really important. And I think you find that probably you see best practice in terms of that in the early years, in lower primary schools, in the lower primary where they do that. In terms of promoting it that via social media, that would be your colleagues in community and enterprise who would take that forward, but certainly one for us to note. And thank you for that. The recording of bullying incidents is live on CMIS. Another positive aspect, so that they're not, they're not recorded as general bullying incidents, they are recorded as racist incidents where these take place. And another positive aspect to that is that by examining the information that's been recorded on CMIS, senior staff in schools can take a balcony view, if you like, and it means then that they're not dealing with incidents in isolation. What they can see are any patterns or connections between incidents, and that's really important when tackling incidents and if you're actually trying to shift cultures and ethos. So staff in schools do have the ability to do that. So that was since August 2019. Page 60 describes in general really when and how that's been developed. There's a refreshed national approach to recording and monitoring incidents of bullying, which emphasises not just the importance of recording, but ensures appropriate action in response to them. And there is national guidance available. And we also provide training in respect of that to our school staff. So that, that point I made about not just dealing with isolated incidents or dealing with them in a one-off way, taking that balcony view is across all of that. In terms of the questionnaire, I'd need to check what you're referring to. Are you talking about a questionnaire that's already available across the council? I see Tony's got his hand up. He's maybe got a better idea, Chair, than I do about that.
Okay, do you want to come in on that just now, Tony?
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks, Councillor McCallum. Maybe just a couple of things on that. Obviously, it's important that we try to support and gain as much information as possible. We have a Parents as Partners group, though, and we have a questionnaire just coming out on something slightly different at the moment as well. So my first instinct is I'd like to go through them and work with them on any future questionnaires that come out. So if it's okay, I would do that first so that we're involving that parental group. We base the questions on the most recent questionnaire that's coming out based around the national government. The Scottish Government have a questionnaire format. So we try to make it obviously in parent-friendly language. And then we run that past our Parents as Partners group and from our Parents as Partners group. So if it's okay, I'll take it via them and then I can come back specifically to you on that, if that's okay.
Chair, can I ask a subsequent, please?
Yep.
See, Tony, it was just to say, see the Parents by Partner groups. Do you have anybody on that's from the Black and minority ethnic communities? That's the first question. And see, with regards to the bullying being reported, it was mentioned at a previous committee that basically, even though incidents were getting reported, they could report in CMIS, the bullying incidents of racial bullying incidents weren't getting reported because they're held in the schools and they have a paper file. So what you've said is different to what I've actually been told out in the community by head teachers. So I think we definitely need to look at that. And the third thing, I would definitely take that forward then with community and enterprise. So if people could come back and answer, that'd be great. And thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McAdam. Okay, Tony, were you wanting to come back in there? I wasn't sure if your hand was up. You lit up purple.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
My little hand is up, thanks. The answer at the moment, Councillor McAdams, is no, but we would welcome representative members from all of our communities in our Parents Partners group.
Thank you, Tony. I think actually it was a point which I thought I'll maybe discuss this with Vinny and Tony later. I think it's very important when we're putting anything out to parents at all, and I absolutely take Monique's points about making sure people get eyes on this before anything goes out, and particularly members of BAMI community if we've got a group of people who we think we should be consulting. But I had wanted to make the point about sensitivities about language and making sure we're using clear language and that gets run through our parent partners, because I think that's very important. If we want to have any meaningful engagement, we need to make sure that parents are involved in putting something together, meaningful and something that's accessible. That's the whole point of what we're doing. So
thank you, Chair. I look forward to taking that forward.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Monique. I've got Councillor Neil, I think, is a legacy hand. So let's take Councillor Fagan, then Councillor Allison. So Councillor Fagan, please.
Thanks, Chair. I think the other points that was being raised were covered in that previous conversation, so that's quite a productive note to conclude on. My question then would relate to 5.13, which is about Gypsy traveller education. There's a line in here that states the experience in South Lanarkshire Council is that many Gypsy traveller families are content for their children to attend primary school but choose not to register them in a secondary school. I'm aware of this. I have a ward interest, and I think we have 2 Gypsy traveller sites in East Kilbride, one of in South Lanarkshire. One of them is in my ward in East Kilbride. I'm also aware that over the past sort of 7 or 8 years, there's probably been quite a bit of national literature and reports from Scottish Government, Scottish Parliament, national bodies about really raising awareness about Gypsy traveller experiences of public services. So I'm just curious to kind of get under this to find out what are the reasons why we get those registrations in primary school but not in secondary? Is it to do with a mobile way of life, or is there an issue there with us as an education authority that we could be working to address? And I think there's some very positive steps set out in the remainder of 5.3, but I'm just curious to get behind that split that we have between primary and secondary.
Thanks, Councillor. Anne?
I would want to confirm and reassure the member that there isn't an issue with us as an education authority in relation to this. This isn't something that's peculiar to South Lanarkshire. This is something really that stems from the culture, the Gypsy traveller culture. So I wouldn't want to speak for them right now. What's being described in the paper is what is a reflection of the decisions that are taken. And I think what I would just say is that it ties in with the culture of that particular group. But what GTEC does, and what we've done in recognising and respecting those choices, what this council has done for a long, long time now, is reach out to that particular group and include and strive to include them and to meet them in a way that they find acceptable. And in places that they find acceptable. So, for example, a secondary school environment isn't one that many of these families wish their young people to be in. Okay, during the course of the school day, which is why we use centres, we use, any place that they would find acceptable for us to come together with them. So, as I said, I would want to reassure the member this isn't a South Lanarkshire Council phenomenon. This is absolutely linked to culture, but I think historically, and I think we are recognised for our good practice in South Lanarkshire at national level, and we have been for some time now, and we have very, very committed staff on the ground who are working with these groups and know the families really, really well, and have made those links over the years. So I think what you see reflected in the paper, although very, very briefly, is good practice actually in relation to keeping connections with these families and with this body.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Anne. I have heard our name used in vain in COSLA meetings as an example of good practice that's come from years of work in this area to build engagement and build trust. And I know that's not just across this council resource, but across other council resources as well. And I think that's to absolutely be commended. Thank you for that extra information. I'm going to go to Councillor Allison and then Councillor Razak, please.
Thanks, Chair. At 5.3, Tackling Poverty, it's very much welcome that the Scottish Attainment Challenge has now delivered over £10 million to schools in South Lanarkshire since its inception. I don't think we can judge the success of any of these schemes simply by the amount of money that has been used in these. Can you tell us how you're going to evaluate the success of the Attainment Challenge, and probably in the terms of the following sentence there, and how we're going to judge whether it's being effective or not?
Councillor, I've got Carol Mackenzie. You want to come in just now?
Yes, what I would like to say, Councillor Allison, is that each Attainment Challenge school, we have 20 Attainment Challenge schools, they have to make a bid for specific interventions that they want to do to tackle poverty. And those interventions are planned for and then they are evaluated on a school by school level, and they are not only scrutinised by us, but they are scrutinised at Scottish Government level. So there is that thread of accountability there, and each of these schools can demonstrate real progress within that kind of tackling poverty agenda. And I think it also might be worth noting that the Scottish Attainment Challenge programme is changing. And we are moving away from funding being allocated to 20 separate schools on a school by school basis. And Tony and I are actually off to a meeting on Thursday to hear about the new way of allocating Attainment Challenge funding. And we believe that will be, instead of having several challenge authorities, of which we are not one, and having separate challenge schools, of which we have 20, that the funding across Scotland is now going to be redistributed across the 32 local authorities. So we are hoping, because of that new formula, that we will benefit from that, because it will become a central pot of money that we can look across schools that currently don't benefit from Scottish Attainment Challenge funding, but that we can look at how all schools within South Lanarkshire can get a bit of additional funding in order to raise attainment of children who live in poverty. And like any initiative that we would introduce at its source checks and balances in terms of planning, measuring outcomes and evaluation of those outcomes, rather than simply, allocating money without any, if you like, strings attached.
Supplementary, Chair.
Sure.
Yeah, well, that's interesting to hear, Carol, that they're changing the system, and if it's broadening it out, hopefully there will then be an increase in the resources being made available to councillors for that, to councils, and it's not simply disseminating the funding over fewer schools. The evaluation that has been given to Scottish Government for the Attainment Fund, can that be made available to members locally as well, so that we can see what benefit has been accrued to our pupils for this investment?
Certainly, we could certainly consider a subsequent report to this committee, specifically around the impact of the Scottish Attainment Challenge funding, if that would be helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. I know we've had similar reports on PEF, for example, and people equity funding that have come to the committee to talk about impact. So it'd be an update on SAC and or PEF. Perhaps when we know a little more about how the new allocation is going to take place would make sense. Thank you. I have Councillor Razak, please. Councillor Razak.
Thank you. I really enjoyed reading the report because I like the fact that it's addressed most of the issues that are out there. The questions I've got are three. First one's the ASD, the Autistic Spectrum Disorder. The children waiting to be assessed and that on the waiting list. The waiting list could be anything up to 2 years. How are they dealt with within the schools? And are they giving you any extra help? The second one is an ASN, the additional support needs. The pupils, do they have enough space in the playground? Because we have had concerns raised that the playground, in certain areas is not big enough, and that there needs to be, look at, are there any guidelines on that? If so, can that be signposted to them, please? And the final one is, I echo what Monica said, because it's normally, the questions I've been asking for a long time, and the thing about the race equality side of it is that we've seen this year with the Euros and everything else, with the distasteful comments made on social media on England players, and also with what's happening with Hamza Yusuf and the concerns and the things that were happening there. But my question about this would be the English families, if they're receiving abuse in the school, is that classed as racial or is that classed as bullying? Because there is an increase of that as well. I myself have been receiving complaints about that and questions about it. And that would be my third and final question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Razak. I'll come on to Anne in a second. As I would say to everybody, if you have a specific complaint or a specific inquiry that's raised with you about the size of a playground or anything, obviously, which is a local matter, then please make sure that's something which you report up to officers as well, because committees are not always the best place to get into local bits and pieces, but I'm sure Anne will be able to provide you with a general answer just now. Anne, thanks.
Thank you. Turning then to the first area of the question in relation to autistic spectrum disorder and the waiting lists for assessment and how are they dealt with while they're awaiting assessment. Maybe just to confirm that diagnosis of autism is a health-led diagnosis, and it's based on assessment information from different sources, education included in that. So we feed into the assessment process, but the diagnosis is essentially a health-led diagnosis. What we deal with is the needs that a child presents with. So what we don't deal with are labels as such. So where a child is at school and is presenting with features that are autism-linked features, then those features, behaviours, communication needs will be dealt with in the context of, and I've mentioned it a couple of times today, this morning, our staged intervention approach. So we look at a child's needs without labelling. We identify whether those needs can be addressed using resources and planning within the classroom. If not, we move to stage 2. We widen our scope to resources and planning from within the school. If not, it's stage 3. We move out with the school. We look at education, what resources are within education that we can draw on, and then out with that at our most, at our highest level, we're looking out with education into other agencies. So that's an important approach, that we're not dealing with labels, we're dealing with children who manifest with needs, and it's the needs that we are working to meet. Okay, and we talked to you about autism being a continuum, so you'll all know from your own experience, children on the autism spectrum have got a wide range of needs. No two children are the same, and that's why it's so important, not just for autism, but for any additional support need, that we deal with the presenting behaviours, the presenting communication, the presenting needs, and not simply the label. Your point about waiting lists is correct. There are long waiting lists, and that's why it's important that we have got a construct where we can plan for all children within that construct without being dependent on a label being attached to them. And that's where our embedding of a good, strong staged intervention approach across all our establishments is absolutely vital. So I would hope that that would reassure you in relation to that. Around space and playgrounds, you know that our school estate is second to none. It's very, very good. In relation to the quality of our playgrounds, and the equipment and the experiences available to our children, you'll know from your own experience and the other authorities that far surpasses anything else that's out there. I'm not personally aware of any space standards other than the standard space standards for playgrounds that might apply to children with additional support needs. What I would say is that within special settings, classes are usually smaller. So groupings, whether they're inside the school or out with the school, are smaller and typically in a larger space. I'm certainly not aware of any approaches that would reduce space. So you're talking about maybe classes of 6, 8 or 10 who have got access to spaces that, if they're co-located, are basically designed for, you know, mainstream numbers, larger numbers. But I'll ask the questions, and if there's anything specific in relation to that, certainly happy to get back to the member. I note your comments in relation to the experiences this year in the Euros, and I think we all watched that and have our views on that. I did mention earlier that the CMIS management information system now allows us to record racist bullying and to label it as that. And our own Treat Me Well policy also addresses the issue of racist bullying as well. So it's not something that we skirt over or we ask, you know, for it to be dealt with or only addressed in a general sense. We don't skirt the issue. We accept that there may be behaviours that have that, you know, that are of that nature, and we do provide training and support to staff in dealing with those behaviours, but they are dealt with within the context of our bullying anti-bullying policy, as are other bullying behaviours for reasons that are related to religion, race, you know, any other characteristic actually. Well, they are dealt with in the same way, in an overarching anti-bullying way. We do recognise that there are aspects which are specific to a particular characteristic, and we don't shy away from that. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you very much, Anne.
Chair supplemental.
One, yep.
Okay. First, I apologise if you thought I was putting a specific question, and I wasn't, because I said constituent. I didn't name any school. The reason for that was that I did take it up with Tony, but I was just made aware that it might be in the same issue in other areas, and that was the reason that question was made. So I apologise for that if that's what you thought. Second thing was that the final one was about the specific, if there's anti-English behaviour. So, for instance, somebody that goes to school with an English accent and is from England and they're getting abused, would that be classed as racist, or is that classed as bullying?
Okay. Thank you for coming back, Councillor. Read the first point. It was just as a general point to everyone. If it's something that I think sounds like it's quite specific to a school, or I'm not sure, I like to just say to everyone, you know what, if you want something sorted out quickly or looked at in detail, which is maybe not something that the rest of the committee would necessarily need to discuss, then go to your officer. But it sounds like been a wider question, and absolutely fair enough. I'm going to bring in Tony McDade. I think he's got his hands up. Tony.
Thanks, Chair. It's just that very last point for Councillor Razak. In our Treat Me Well policy, we do talk about minority ethnic groups often experience bullying based on perceived differences in dress, communication, appearance, belief, culture, as well as skin colour or accent. So it is possible that if it was deemed in a situation as a school for a young person, you know, to do with their ethnicity or indeed where they come from, that could be included. We certainly wouldn't stop that, and it can be part of that process. The reason it's difficult to judge is sometimes it's about the specific individual incidents itself, but our policy does retain the opportunity for that to be recorded as a racist incident.
Thanks for that clarity, Tony. Thank you. All right, I've got Councillor McAdams. Briefly, please, Councillor. This item has taken up a considerable amount of time now.
One question, Chair. It was to ask, just because it was something that came to mind then from what Mo was speaking about, how many schools are using their PEF budget to pay for a Bernardo's support worker to combat the 2-year+ waiting list for CAMS?
That's something we need to go in and find out,
Yeah, I can certainly find out the number of schools who are using a Bernardo's support worker, but whether you qualified that, Councillor McAdams, you said to counter the 2-year waiting list for CAMS, that would be something that head teachers, and giving a reason for, I mean, if they're engaging Bernardo's support workers to work with individual children who have autistic features, if you like, or behaviour, then that would be something quite specific. It's more likely that they're engaging Bernardo's support workers to work with a range of children for a range of reasons, and not specifically because a child is on a waiting list for CAMHS, I would have to say.
Thanks very much, thank you.
Thank
yep, so
you.
PEF is
Chair,
obviously...
Can Anne come back with the number of the amount of schools in South Lanarkshire that are using, then I'll restructure my question, that are using their PEF budget to pay for a Bernardo support worker, please?
Absolutely, I'll get that information for you. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks very much, Anne. Thank you. Right, I can't see any further questions. Thank you very much for all of your input on that, everybody. It was really interesting debate and discussion around what was a very detailed paper. So thank you for all of that and for raising the points which you have. And I know there's quite a bit of bits and pieces of actions that will come out of that as well. So I feel that was very positive. Thank you. We have gone way over 40 minutes over the 1 hour break point. So I'm going to suggest that we do have a break point at the moment, just for 5 minutes. So I'm not entirely sure which clock I'm working off at the moment. I'm going to suggest we come back in about 5 minutes time. So I think that would be 11:42, strictly speaking, according to that, if everyone is agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, see you in 5, everybody. Thank you.